Global Forum and Global Citizenship, it is my feeling that what would help, it would not solve the problems, but it would help, would be some sort of global ethic that people came to regard the use of computers differently. We have in many areas what I consider to be global ethics about the environment, about mail systems, about endangered species. Now we violate these, but nonetheless they are there. At the Edison Electric Institute meeting this year, which is the big trade association for the electric utilities, there was a lot of discussion of how we can do this, but not in the way that I have described it, but in a different sense. They had people, one very compelling speaker from Israel, who said, you've got to marshal the hackers on your side, turn them into what are called, apparently in the trade, white hat hackers. So the white hats don't break into people because they can. A lot of the savagery on the internet is because I can. Hey, I can get into the DOD. I can get into the Vietnamese government because you can. If you had a sort of prevailing ethic that you don't do that any more than you just kill animals because you find it fun, or you bring into a country wildlife that will become an invasive species. We are governed internationally by these ethics, by like-mindedness, whole starters of like-mindedness, but we haven't, in the computer security field, marshaled the goodwill of the world to say to children, to people working on computers, because you can, it doesn't mean you should. Because you can take money out of that's lying in the street doesn't mean you should. Because you can take goods out of a store because you can doesn't mean you should. And if we establish an ethic, the concept of an idea that you shouldn't do this, that children learn, and that rather than being destructive, the freelance hacker, the adventure hacker, the hacker out for kicks, turn that energy, that creativity, that enthusiasm into something positive. And that would be a very large, that would get out of the system an awful lot of adventure hacking and make it quite positive. But until somebody comes up, and I think the Boston Global Forum may have done that, with a concept for an ethic that you can talk about, spread around. And these things happen. We did not have globally an environmental ethic, so Rachel Carson's book was published in 1962, and the world started thinking about the environment quite differently, and it got an environmental ethic. It's at work all the time, often violated, but nonetheless, overall, at work successfully.
I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of what we are trying to focus on here today. That's what the Ethical Code of Conduct is about. That's what the Global Citizenship Education is about. That's what Cyber Civil Defense is about. All three of these are trying to converge on what you described. I mean, I've used the phrase with some of the folks here offline, we don't have a social contract for cyberspace. So, any other comments or thoughts on that?
Well, I think a big reason why we see cyber, how I did that. Big reason we see cyber criminals doing what they're doing. This is what I've seen in my own research because I also studied Russia too. Is Russians have a lot of these cyber criminals in their territories because they're highly skilled, but there's no jobs for them.
Right.
And so that's what you're going to do. Here in the United States, we're able to find maybe for the most part find these potential bad guys and turn them into good guys, right? And so, this is another thing that we need to think about is all of this is socially and socioeconomically connected too. Because you see the majority of these cyber criminals either post-Soviet space, Russia, Eastern Europe, places where they're highly educated yet the economy is doing very poorly. And so this, I don't know, so I'm not like kind of pushing out a policy here, but this is a big reason as to why we see it. Is because of these situations. So what can we do about that is the question.
Right, so there could be economic incentives that are at the
exactly.
behavioral level to change behaviors. Other comments? Thoughts? Rod?
Alan, to answer the governor's question about how do you monitor, or how do you enforce this? Most of the industries that we're talking about have organizations that audit them and monitor them. In the medical field, you have lots of, for hospitals, you have lots of board certification. And you also have certification from the states for your mental health clinics. What has to happen is that these kinds of principles need to be part of those certification processes, so that people get dinged if in fact they are not following it. You already have that in the financial services industry. You don't necessarily have it in the healthcare industry.
I mean, if there were a computer security audit that your auditors did once a year that was your financial audit, that would be something that would help. Yes.
Or when a hospital's certified, it's the same kind of thing.
Part of the audit process.
It's part of the audit process.
You guys could probably know more about this than me, but isn't the cybersecurity industry in itself not very well regulated, meaning that people can claim to be able to do one thing and not do another? So they say I can do ICS SCADA, but they don't.
It's a very large problem in the
Yeah,
utility
exactly.
industry. 500 companies have started up
Exactly.
to tell utilities how they can, and nobody can gauge whether they can deliver or not. I'd like to ask the table a question, and that is, won't there be a technological fix eventually?
Yeah.
Won't eventually computers be secure with a switch on them which says off and there's off?
No.
No. you
Because
never-
ultimately, people are empowered to access a computer, okay? Whether password, thumbprint, whatever. So once you're in, and so the 85% today comes from somebody pretending to be you. However smart computers will be, they will continue to be able to pretend to be you. Okay? So they will, and that's the real challenge that I see. There are people saying, won't this be solved by some technology? No. I think what you've articulated is more important than some technology.
But there are a whole panoply of steps you can take
Yes.
to address the security problem. You can bring in sociology, economics. For example, you can encourage the sale of cyber insurance. So a business wants to protect themselves against interruption of service, loss of data, big expense associated with lawsuits. Today you can buy insurance. However, and my hope, I gave testimony before a Senate committee, and I was asked by a senator, one of the senators from Arizona, do you believe there's a role for cyber insurance? And I said, yes. I said, you know, we have what's called, when you have workers' compensation insurance. And the way that works is an insurance company will come into your facility and say, if you let me collect data about incidents that occur and anonymize them, and then give them to an independent party who will use this information to create actuarial tables so I can better price insurance, I'm willing to lower your interest rate, your insurance rate. If I come into your shop and I find that there are working conditions that are hazardous, could cause injury to your workers, if you let me suggest improvements and you follow them, I'll reduce your insurance rate. Okay, so my hope would be that once cyber insurance was sold, these companies would have experts on security, and they'd look at the facilities that you're in and ask, are you meeting these standards? Do you have this kind of software, that kind of software? If you don't, then if you're willing to install it, I'll give you a lower rate. So you can use these standard economic mechanisms which have feedback built into them to encourage good behavior. You also have to train engineers to write software that's secure. So there is a programming language that people use. It's called C, the letter C. And there's another version of that. It's called C++. And those languages are very unsafe to use. Okay? Know that if you simply program in what's called memory managed language, Java is one example, C#, which is a Microsoft language, is another example. If you use those languages, you're not going to create the kind of errors in programming that will lead to a type of attack known as buffer overflow. There are a whole series of steps like this. You can legislate, as the state of New York has, to say that, as Rod mentioned, which is to say you have to have a chief information security officer, you have to have a plan. When Microsoft sells even us a piece of software, they're not allowed the engineers are not allowed to write the software unless they follow a regimen that increases the level of security of the software that they write. And then the software has to go through a battery of tests, meaning that the software is analyzed by other software looking for vulnerabilities. If it meets the tests, then it's allowed to ship. But they're not allowed to ship until they have put in place a team of people who can respond when vulnerabilities have been discovered after the product has been shipped, so that they can then immediately, these are people who understand the software and know how it was put together and can immediately address the vulnerabilities that have been discovered. So there are a number of measures you can take like that, all of which will overall elevate the level of security. And as I said, there's information sharing, which is having a powerful effect in the financial industry and now the electrical grid and other sectors as well.
So I was just going to add to that. I think it's a great idea as kind of a backstop to the loss.
Yeah.
But it invokes the idea that there's loss, which is why you're insuring against it, and then you're building upon that with these standards. To prevent, I think it would be helpful to go the neurobehavioral route, which we also heard about today. We really need that for the preventative measures, so that people are actually thinking along a certain path. Both, the Kahneman slow and fast thinking, and you were in fact saying, just to try to start with fast thinking.
Yeah, I think the global ethics, all the higher order social changes are imperative. And at the same time, I think if we can bring together the tech industry more with the behavioral neuroscientists to be able to leverage what's known about shaping human behavior, not in a nefarious way, but in a way that is conducive to safety, that there's a fair benefit there. And then I want to come back to something that Alan said, that just with the chip, there were great reductions compared to the regular card, and you also said that 80-some-odd% of the breaches were password related, and so it would seem that some sort of way of instantiating best practices and almost hardwiring them in, making them easy and accessible for password management or multi-layer passwords or biometrics would, while we're creating an ethic, while we are doing all these other longer-term and foundational things, might be helpful as well.
Yeah, Apple solved the problem for a lot of people. If only we could use this to sign on to everything, right? It's a thumbprint. It's better than a password.
Not in that gummy bears.
However, I'd like to say something about
Please.
This question. So, sort of, whether a system can be, completely secure, or whether we'll have technology that can build systems that are completely secure, no, right? But there are certain types of attacks that the technology will prevent eventually.
Yes.
Right? And so, as an example, a big reason that data breaches occur is because data is stored on systems in plain text. And the reason they're stored in plain text is because we need to operate on them.
Right.
Right. So, but we do have methods in research. They're still sort of in development, still research, that allow us to design systems that can operate on encrypted data.
Yeah.
And so, with progress in this field, we would actually be able to design these systems so that medical records or other such data is never decrypted. Right? So that's an example of future technology that could prevent a whole class of attacks. Maybe not all attacks, but a large attacks.
Tuan?
Because we have to stop for, we have another event. So
outside.
So first that is on behalf of Governor Michael Dubas, he have to leave some early some minutes for provider. So I would like to say thank you so much. I highly appreciate your whole attendance and speech today and talk discussion, wonderful discussion, and we hope we continue continue, not stop now, and we continue discuss by email group and share and exchange ideas. We will email you very much and discuss how to make our ideas, our initiative happen. And I hope we continue very much online. And we will have another very exciting and very important event, Global Cyber Security Day, December 12th, at the Harvard Loeb House here. So I hope all of us will have chance to meet each other again on December 12th. Thank you so much.
Got the focus, got the